Hello, hello. Okay, I don't know if anybody's around on this lovely Saturday afternoon, but I'm going to go ahead and do this live that I postponed earlier in the week. And if anybody happens to be catching this, I would love it if somebody would just let me know that my sound is coming in okay. So, you guys know me by now, I think, although there's maybe a few new people in the group this week. So I'll just do a quick introduction for you guys. So I'm Anna Blake. I'm a family doctor in Owen Sound, Ontario, in Canada, and I'm also a life coach. I've got a 1,300 patient. Oh, hello. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, there's something funny going on. Sometimes StreamYard lets me see who's posting, sometimes it doesn't. So I apologize that I can't tell today who's actually posting, but thanks for being here with me, and thank you for confirming that you can hear me. So anyway, I really came to life coaching because I was a burned out and suicidal physician last fall, and life coaching concept actually, I credit them with saving my life and my career by helping me to understand, and really more importantly, to learn about how to change the patterns of thinking that were causing me harm in my life. I feel like this is particularly significant right now because this past week on Thursday, in the United States, it was National Physician Suicide Awareness Day. I don't know if we have one in Canada, but I speak openly about my experiences being suicidal as a physician because I really firmly believe that this is the way forward to stopping the stigma around this and the isolation that I think is the sole thing that's responsible for this whole stigma and physicians withdrawing into themselves, and in the end unfortunately resulting in far too many deaths. Okay, so I plan to talk to you guys about this topic, staying zen. I'm just playing with some fun concepts, but how we can stay zen through interactions with challenging patients and colleagues. And this honestly is applicable to really anybody in your life that you have challenging relationships with. um, but I apologize. I had to reschedule. This week has been a bit of a tough week for me. I think most of you know now I'm pregnant, and I had to have a chorionic villus sampling this week. Well, I chose to have a chorionic villus sampling this week due to some genetic issues that we carry in our family. And so I needed an extra day of rest beyond what I thought I was going to need. And so as a result, I needed to take some time for myself to sleep on Thursday night. I tried. I was mostly prepared, but there was just no way it was going to happen. So next week I'm going to do a talk. I don't know when yet, but I will share that as soon as I decide on a time. And I do appreciate the grace that you guys are giving me with time when I've had to reschedule things lately. That means a lot to me. And, it's important to me to set a good example for you guys. And so that's why I'm open when I'm struggling about things as well. But I'm going to do a live on imposter syndrome next week. So if anybody has any sort of specific situations that they would like to get some information on, please send me a private message or post something in the group, and I'll be sure to cover that as well. So you're not going to want to miss that one. Okay, so today we're going to chat about, I've crossed off the housekeeping part of my list. We are going to chat about challenging patients and colleagues, and we're going to talk about an approach to how we can start to deal with these kind of interactions that's going to benefit us. And I'm going to do a quick question and answer at the end. I'm going to debut my new website for you guys, and I'll do a quick question and answer on my fall coaching program. It's closing enrollment on September 27th, and I got a couple of spots left. And at the end, if anybody sticks it out for the whole thing live, I'll draw for a little prize. I always like to do that. Okay, so here we go. That's my 2 pages of intro notes. I'm really working on getting this stuff shorter, but it's still a work in progress. So why did I pick this topic? Lots of you, well, first of all, you guys voted on it and really wanted to hear this, but also lots of you, when you joined this group, you answered my question about what you would love to get more information from this group on with answers that pertain to difficult interactions with people. And so, and I coach on this a lot with my female physician clients. And so I thought there were just a whole lot of reasons why this was a great topic for us to cover right now. I do want to quickly reference that I've done a video. If you go into the topics list, you'll see a tab up at the top of the Facebook group. If you go into the topics, you'll see one that's called relationships. And if you just start scrolling down the post, you will see a video that I did in the past on the heart sync patient. I think it's really relevant for this topic as well. So I'm not necessarily duplicating, maybe some of the content will overlap, but you might want to go back and have a look at that too, especially if you like this one. Okay, so let's talk about the toxic or challenging or difficult people that we interact with in our lives. I want you just to take a moment and I want you to think about a patient who, when you see their name on your day sheet, when you get a message from your staff that, you know, they've called in about something, that as soon as you think about that person, you get this sinking feeling in your stomach, or maybe your heart rate goes up, or, you know, you start to become flushed, you start to feel dread, anxiety, maybe anger. I want you just to think about that person for a minute. The other type of person that you may interact with that would be really relevant to this subject matter we're going to talk about today would be a colleague. So maybe you go to a group meeting or you receive an email, and as soon as you see that person's name, as soon as they start to speak, as soon as you get an email from them, you immediately feel your back going up a little bit. You feel yourself starting to get defensive, angry, maybe starting to feel judgmental, maybe starting to blame a little bit. Think about what you're thinking about, what emotions you're feeling, and what you do when you have those interactions with those types of patients. And you might want to come back to this after you're done sort of watching all of this video and really take a look at that again, because that's going to be the foundation for how you're going to start to do this work in changing your experiences with these kinds of people. Okay. Why do you think you dislike or you dread these interactions with this particular person or maybe people so much? Many of us are going to conclude that it's because the person is challenging, because they are difficult, because they are toxic, like as if it's some truth that everybody in the world would agree upon pertaining to this person. But what I'm going to teach you about today is that you can choose to completely debunk this myth for yourself right now. Okay? Yep, you can. Okay? So let's just give it a shot today. There are no challenging, difficult, or toxic people. What? Yes. You can use whatever terminology you like to describe people. And even if there were challenging or difficult or toxic people in our lives, okay, they can still only cause us harm if we choose to let them do so. And I'm going to show you how that's true today. Okay. It isn't true that people can get under our skin and they can cause us to behave certain ways and they can cause us to do certain things. And every time we believe this concept that somebody is toxic or they're difficult or they make me feel a certain way, they make me do certain things, I'm always out of control when I'm with this person, we totally disempower ourselves. It gives 100% of our power over to the other person to have control over our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior. And this is why I choose to believe there are no toxic or challenging or difficult people. And when I notice myself thinking that, I come back to exactly what I'm going to teach you about today. Why would you choose to let somebody control you like that? Why? Especially somebody whose thoughts, whose actions you don't necessarily agree with. Why do we do that? But we do it all the time, right? I have a long-standing history of doing this in my life before I knew how to do this work. And even still, I find myself falling into this pattern, but I can go back and I can regroup and I can use the tools that I'm going to present you with today to regain my power and take control where I can. Brooke Castillo teaches us this concept, and I kind of like it. So just because you're in the presence of a poisonous snake it doesn't mean that you were poisoned. So even if you want to hang on to the idea that some people are more toxic, more challenging, more difficult, it still doesn't mean that they can get to you. Okay. So here's what really happens. The person who we think is difficult or challenging, they're just the trigger for us to have a certain series of thoughts that cause us to experience negative emotion. And then we act from that negative emotional place. Okay. So you had to know that I was going to come back to the model if I was going to talk about this today. But the person is the circumstance or the trigger. And this is the self-coaching model that we use at the Life Coach School. So circumstances trigger our thoughts, which then fuel our feelings, which then fuel our actions, which creates, in the end, the result that we get. Okay. This is how other people affect how we show up in the world. They're just a circumstance. Okay. But our thoughts are always 100% optional, and they might not feel optional because our brain plays this sneaky little trick on us where it makes us think that this person, the difficult person, causes us to feel this way. Okay. And we totally lose sight of the fact that we have to decide to interpret their behavior in a certain way to feel that way. Okay. But we need to know what our thoughts are when we're with that person if we want to change them. So much of this happens so automatically and so innately to us that we don't realize that this is happening. Okay. But guess what? It's really good freaking news that this is what's happening in our brains, because we go through this sequence of thoughts which create feelings, which fuel our actions, which create our results 50 to 60,000 times a day. So you have lots of practice doing this. And we know that some people bug us, get under our skin. You know, we'd like to think that, right? And then for other people, it's like, how come they don't bother you? Like, how come that doesn't happen to you? So we know that we could take two different people who can be in the same relationship with the same person. For one person, the relationship is toxic. For the other person, it's wonderful, it's fine, it's neutral. It could be anything, right? The difference is how those two people are thinking about the relationship with that other person. Okay. So I'm going to come back to this again. Our thoughts are eventually 100% optional to us. They're not necessarily in the moment, but as soon as we start to do this work and we start to understand this, they become something that we can identify and something we can start to change if we choose to do so. So I want you to always remember when you're thinking about these difficult people in your life that what's going to tend to happen to us is that our thoughts about this person are going to masquerade around like they're just facts. Okay. They're going to masquerade around like a circumstance, like this person is difficult, as if that's like something we could prove in a court of law. Okay. But really, that's a thought we have about that person. The person themselves are the circumstance. They're the trigger that causes us to think that. Okay. But then what happens is that we blame that other person for the way we think, we feel, we act, and the results we get in the relationship. We abdicate responsibility for our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own behavior. And many times we even mirror the very behavior that the other person is exhibiting that we don't like ourselves. We might do that towards the other person, or we might do that towards ourselves. So for instance, okay, say, you have a colleague who is always talking negatively about other colleagues, always saying that they would have managed a case differently, always judging somebody else's management. We have a thought, okay, they're a difficult person, right? When I'm with them, I always feel, say for instance, an example would be defensive, okay? And we think we feel defensive because of the way they behave, okay, the things they say. But really, we have this sneaky little thought in there every time we're with them that they're actually talking about me. They're actually judging my management. What are they saying about me when I'm not here? What do they think I need to do differently, right? We have this thought. We make it mean something about ourselves, and that causes us to feel defensive, right? And then what do? Our action is we go inward and we start to pick apart everything that we do. We start to attack ourselves. We turn that inward on ourselves. Or we might instead start to do the same thing to them. Okay. We might start to say, oh, but what about that time that they made a mistake? I wouldn't have done things that way. Why are they so judgmental? Why do they have to be like that? And maybe we turn and we gossip to somebody else about them, right? But the result that it creates really is one where we start to adopt the belief either about ourselves or about them that we're not, maybe the thought, it's usually a reflection of the thought, right? Either towards us. I can't remember what I said the initial thought was, but it'll be a reflection of it, right? It'll either be like, this is, if when we're around them, we believe that, I'm not good enough, then we're going to either create evidence to support that we're not good enough, or we're going to think that they aren't good enough because they do these behaviors, they do these kind of things. Okay. So it can show up in either two ways. One would be we mirror it towards ourselves, whatever they're saying, or the other would be we mirror it back to them. Okay. Now, I tend to see a few different patterns of behavior in how we tend to show up with these sorts of people in my clients. And so these are the big three that I tend to see. There can be others, but the three that I notice a lot would be, the first would be we either kind of pretend that the relationship is fine or we neglect the relationship. So we might kind of just choose to bury our head in the sand, just kind of suck it up, just go through the motions, just sort of play by the rules. But then we go home and we experience a lot of negative emotion about it. Okay. And we really just have this sort of hopeless attitude that nothing is ever going to change. The second is one where we feel like we really need to fiercely and aggressively stick up for ourselves. And so we become very defensive. We blame, we act out, we become angry, we become frustrated. We might even say things that we don't necessarily mean to say with an attempt to control the behavior of the other person so that we can feel better. So we might make demands, or we might do things to shame the other person into changing the way they're behaving. Okay. The third one, and I think this third one is very, very common. I've seen this in a lot of my physician colleagues, especially female physician colleagues, is that we people please or we deny ourselves. And they both kind of go hand in hand. So we seek approval of the other person by doing things to try to please them. But at the same time, we're just seething underneath. We're just so resentful, so angry. We just loathe the other person. And we are taking action to please them despite ourselves, despite our needs. And we might sort of convince ourselves we're doing that to try to keep the peace, right? We're trying to please them to keep the peace. We may do this with our patients, right? They might have unrealistic expectations of us, but we might do things to please them at our own sacrifice to try to keep the peace. But there really is no peace because we're suffering, we're dealing with turmoil inside. So it's an artificial illusion of peace that we're choosing our own discomfort over the patient potentially experiencing some discomfort. Okay. We're again trying to manipulate and control the patient's experience of the world. But the only place we have power is in controlling ourselves. So I want you just to ask yourselves a question for a minute. What if there were no difficult or challenging patients or colleagues? What if there really was just work that we needed to do ourselves to decide how we want to show up in the world, and how we want to think, how we want to feel, what actions we want to take from a place of intention? What if people could just do whatever they wanted to do in the world and we could just let them do what they want to do. We could give them back responsibility for the actions that they take. They can cross boundaries, they can say words, they can take actions, they can do certain things, and we still get to choose how we're going to think and feel and react, regardless of what other people do. Because here's the thing, you guys. Here's the news flash. People do whatever the heck they want to do in this world, right? Like, it's very, very, very hard to control another person. I think we have some shot maybe at somewhat controlling people who work for us, for one, and our children. Okay. But really only in the sense that we're in a position of as a guide or as a teacher, right? And ultimately, they still get to choose whatever they want to do in response to what we do. Okay. But there's consequences. But the difference with those kind of relationships is that we don't attach our own well being, our own thoughts to the idea that they have to do a certain thing. Okay. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage you to start to expand to these relationships that you have with difficult people. Right. And I want to teach you, I call this letting go of the rope. And I want you to think about it like this. So it's like we're in an invisible tug of war with that difficult or challenging person in our life. Okay. And so whenever we're in an interaction with one another, it's like we're each pulling on an end of the rope. But I want to teach you how to let go of the rope, give them back responsibility for their actions by just solely focusing on your own. Okay. It's not easy work to do, but it's very worthwhile work to do. And here's the reason why. It's for our own sake. It's for our own emotional experience. It's for our own emotional wellness. But moreover, it's worthwhile doing because, yes, ultimately we can decide we no longer want to have an interaction with somebody in our life. That's kind of hard to do, though, when it's a colleague or a patient, right? And it might have a lot of other consequences for you. It might mean relocating or changing your work significantly. If it's a colleague, it might mean having to go through the process with the college of trying to dismiss a patient from your practice. But the reason why, oh no, did I lose my sound? Can anybody else just mention if they can hear me okay? Maybe my microphone died. Okay, somebody else says they're okay. Sometimes if you're on a phone, and though you probably can't hear me, but sometimes if you're on a phone, you just have to click up at the top of the box if you just switch to another to try to change sound. Okay, I see a few people can hear me. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to keep on going. Okay, so the reason why it's so important is this, is because when yes, you can eliminate some of these people from your life, but here's the thing. There's probably always going to be another difficult or another challenging person who's going to show up in your life. So what if we just get rid of the concept completely? We focus on controlling our own behavior and letting other people be them. Then all of a sudden, it's not like you're just waiting for the next one, the next problematic person to show up, right? So, and here's the thing. Often the reason why we dislike people is because we don't like how we show up around them. We don't behave in the ways we want to. We might lose our temper. We might say things we don't mean to say. We might feel like we can't articulate our point if we're intimidated by somebody. We might raise our voice. We might make rash decisions. We might not speak as eloquently as we want to. And then what happens is we blame the other person for this. We think he or she always makes me feel, he or she always makes me do things that I wouldn't normally do. But if someone, for example, is rude to you and then you're rude back, that's 100% on you. It's 100% on us to be responsible for our own behavior. We can always control that. And doesn't mean we don't do things that we regret, but we get to decide what we're going to make that mean about ourselves, and we get to decide what we're going to do about that. So we want to bring this back to self-responsibility. Okay. So always the only thing you're going to be able to control with any sort of surety in this life is you versus somebody else. So, yes, you can 100% choose who you're going to spend your time with, who you're going to engage with in this life. But know this, that you could make a choice, that you can interact with anybody because you know you can manage your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own actions, and you can create the result that you want to create in those interactions. Okay, so how does this apply to medicine, to our interactions with patients, our interactions with colleagues? Remember, it's not always easy to not see these people as being a problem. Okay. It's not always easy to remember that it's our own thoughts that are creating our experiences. Okay. And sometimes we ask ourselves, like, do we even want to do this work? Is it even worthwhile doing this work? But it is, because you get to choose who you want to be in these actions, in these interactions, I should say, who you want to show up as in these relationships. And again, it's worthwhile, like I said a few moments ago, so that we can be around anybody and we can be 100% in control of how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And this takes time and practice, but it is possible. Okay. So here's the steps to how you start to do this. So number one is you got to do your own work. Okay. And this is where you really come back to here and back to what I mentioned at the very, very beginning. You got to ask yourself some questions about, what do I think when I'm with this person? What do I, how does that make me feel? And then how do I show up? And what's the ultimate result of this? This is hard work to do, you guys, especially when we're all caught up in the story ourselves. So this is really what you need a coach for. Okay. This is what I do. I become the neutral observer of my client's mind, and I show them back what their thoughts are creating for them. And in doing so, they are able to start to understand how their mind is working for them and what this is creating for them in the world. And they're able to start to take their power back. This is what we call in coaching the unintentional model. It's just the automatic way in which our brain thinks about things. But so often we can't see the difference between this and this when we're in our own story. Okay. The second piece of this is really starting to ask yourself how you want to show up. So when it comes to our patients and our colleagues, I think this is a really, really, really important question. Like, who do you want to be in this relationship? Who are you? Who do you want to be to your other patients, right? How do you show up for your other patients who you don't have the same kind of dynamic with, right? Do you want to show up that way for all people that you look after? How do you want to show up as a colleague? Do you want to be the kind of person that can show up in the meeting and bring your ideas forward no matter how other colleagues behave? Do you want to be the kind of person who can advocate for what you need, right? Who can ask for what you need no matter how other people respond, right? No matter what other people think about that. Who do you want to show up as? You're not helpless. You're not a victim. But whenever we think we're out of control in these kind of situations, we make ourselves a victim. We create this victim mentality. So who do you want to be if you're open and you're vulnerable and you're telling your own truth, but you're not a victim of the situation? You're not a victim of the other person. Okay. Then the third part of this is really about, with intention, choosing to allow people to behave however they're going to behave in the world. Let them show up and be their own authentic selves, and let them have responsibility for what that creates in the world, without trying to wish them to be different, without trying to force them to be different, without saying that to ourselves that the only way things can get better is if that other person changes. Then the fourth one is really about coming back to this idea of self-responsibility. So taking 100% responsibility for the way we show up in these interactions. This is the best way to disempower these difficult people, to take our control back from, say, a bully or somebody who thinks what we're doing isn't good enough or it's wrong. It's to do our own thought work and really know that we can still show up as the best version of ourselves, no matter what somebody else thinks. Somebody else can say words about us and think things about us, but we don't have to agree with them. We never have to agree with them ever. And that, I said this to a client earlier today. I said, here's the thing, right? I said, other people, we imagine what other people think, okay? But the biggest thing we have to fear is what we think other people think, you guys. The biggest thing we have to fear is what we think other people think. Just let that kind of resonate in your brain for a minute. Because most of the time we have no freaking clue what somebody else is thinking, right? Unless they tell us what they're thinking, we have no clue what they're thinking, right? So we need to really think about what we are thinking other people are thinking about us, because that creates so much of this for us, so much of the dynamic in the relationship, okay? And so much of the dynamic of the relationship with ourselves as well. Okay, so I always say this, we can do this work when we're separate from the situations. But where it becomes most powerful is if we do it right before the interaction with the person, even thinking about it while we're in the interaction with the person, then we do it right afterwards. That's really where we get a lot of momentum on starting to adopt new ways of thinking about relationships with people. Okay, I see somebody here. I apologize because all I see is Facebook users and I don't see any names, but I see somebody wrote that they're having trouble formulating how you want to show up. So this is what I would maybe give you to try to do. So I would think a bit about good relationships that you have that you would consider to be positive relationships in your life, okay? And think about who you are when you show up as just you, okay? I don't know whether you're thinking more about a relationship with a colleague or maybe something unrelated to medicine, or maybe you're thinking about a patient. But the way I would kind of think about this would be, I would think about my ideal relationship. Oh, hi, Nicole. I would think, Nicole, about what your ideal relationship looks like. Okay, so I'm guessing maybe you're thinking about maybe some of your challenging clients, but think about your good ones, because those good relationships, you guys, they don't happen by accident, okay? They happen because we're thinking positive thoughts about ourselves, because we show up authentically, we show up vulnerably in good relationships, okay? And the reason why they're good is because we think thoughts that create positive emotional experiences for us. But because so much of this is automatic, so much of it is unintentional, then we don't know necessarily what we're thinking about in those situations. But you can start to do this work to figure out what's working for you, what's good for you in your life, and then start to apply that. Okay, so I like to think about, like the patient I just love to see on my list. Okay, the one who I'm like, oh, I'm looking forward to going in to see that person today. I haven't seen them in a while. And then I like to think, well, who am I in that interaction? Like, maybe I don't put excessive pressure on myself. Maybe I tell the truth. Maybe if I'm really busy that day, I say to them, look, I have to defer this issue to the next time I see you, or, go out and leave a message with my staff and I'll take care of that other thing in my fast and focused working time. I like to think about how I show up, and then I think about how I can start to apply that to the difficult patient, okay? But another thing that I find really, really helpful is this, is I like this thought that there's two sides to every story, okay? And that there can be infinite numbers of truths, okay? That what can be true for me, the complete opposite experience could be true for my patient. And I've coached some people on this before, because I think sometimes when we get into black and white and right and wrong, when we think that our way or their way is either right or wrong, then we get into this battle of wanting to be right, wanting to prove we are right. But the patient's experience So whatever they bring to us, right? Even if it's an unrealistic expectation for what we can provide them as a physician, whatever they bring to us, that's their truth. That's their belief. That's the way they're seeing it right now. What if we knew why? What if we sought only to figure out what it was like from their perspective and to validate their perspective for them, right? Because I think that's how we show up. So, if, say, for instance, our favorite patient brought us a concern about something, we would be like, oh my gosh, tell me all about that thing, right? We would sit there and we would listen to them, we would hear them out. But then when the person who is, super difficult and complaining every time, and the person that we don't like the way they talk and we already feel inadequate when we get in the room, as soon as they start to complain about something, we get our back up and we're like, no, that can't possibly be true. And no, I've done this in A, B, C, D, E for you before in the past. And how come this isn't good enough? And we might not be saying those things to the patient, but we're thinking them in our mind. And so that's the difference, right? And so that's why I say it's useful to look at what your good patient interactions look like versus what the ones that you really struggle with look like. Okay. And then so the last piece that I have on here is about making requests and setting boundaries. So here's what I want you guys to understand. It's actually totally okay and in your right to ask people for things that you would like to have from relationships. Okay. So to ask a patient, excuse me, say for instance, to ask them to try to do something differently. Okay, so to try to come on time, say for instance, to an appointment. Okay, reasonable to ask. If somebody's repeatedly late, it's reasonable for them to ask that they no longer come late to an appointment. Okay, here's the thing though, they don't have to respond. They can still do whatever they want to do. Okay, and we get to choose whether or not we are going to make them doing whatever they want to do a situation where we're a victim. Okay. We get to decide if we want to blame them for being always late, if we want to say they're difficult people, we get to decide that, right? But the person who suffers in that situation is usually us. We're usually the one that experience a whole lot of negative emotions, thinking we need to change that patient's behavior. But most of the time when we show up to that interaction, we're trying to change their behavior, we show up with this manipulating energy, right? We show up as like, here's the reason why this is important that you show up to your appointment, because I have other people waiting and I'm a busy doctor, right? And we forget that we really have no idea what's going on in that patient's life. I have challenged myself over time to give people the benefit of the doubt and really to challenge myself to believe that people are not just evil assholes most of the time. That there's probably a reason why that person is repeatedly late. And there's been times in my life where I have felt disorganized. Say, for instance, in the last week, I've had to move a bunch of things around because I've had some medical appointments, and I feel like I want to judge myself for being that way, right? And then I just open up this door of compassion towards myself for knowing that I'm a human being and that sometimes I plan to do things and sometimes I take on too much. And sometimes I'm, really just need to be laying down flat in my bed instead of in front of a computer screen teaching, right? And so I give myself the grace to make a change if I need to, right? And I think this is the reality for a lot of people in their lives. And I think that that's part of the reason why patients do the things they do. And it often has nothing to do with us, but we make it mean something about us, that they don't respect us or they don't value our time. And that creates this difficult relationship with the patient, right? One in which we experience a lot of negative emotion. What if we just didn't make that mean anything about ourselves anymore? What if we made that mean that we got 15 minutes to catch up on some paperwork? We got 15 minutes to do something useful with our time, that we got 15 minutes to catch up if we were running behind in our clinic day. There's so many different ways we could choose to look at this. And yes, if you're fee for service, there's in theory a problem if nobody shows up, right? But doesn't mean you can't set a consequence for the patient who doesn't show up, right? Which is that they're going to have to pay a fee for not showing up to their appointment. And we let them know very clearly that that's what's going to happen if they don't show up. I can remember as a youth, I had a psychiatrist who supported me for many years when I was in my 20s. And I can distinctly remember a few times deciding for various reasons that I wasn't going to go to my appointment and knowing full well that I was going to get an invoice for the appointment and just deciding that I was just going to pay for not showing up that day because it was more important to me that whatever else was going on for me in my life, I decided I wasn't going to show up. And, it's like for me, now I feel so differently about those kind of things, right? But that was just the reality of my world at that point in time in my life. And so I think I can use that experience to give some grace to patients who might be going through something similar in their life. Okay. Now, I want to explain one more thing real quick before I wrap this up is about boundaries. Okay. And so, setting boundaries is really important. Okay. And here's the thing about setting boundaries is that when we have a person in our life who violates a boundary, it's our responsibility to know what the boundary is, but it's also our responsibility to set the consequence. And it has to be something that we're going to do in response to the person who violates the boundary. So, for instance, one thing that one thing that might happen would be that, say, you had a colleague who, every time they scheduled a meeting with you, they yelled at you, or you had a colleague who, every time I scheduled a meeting with you, they made some kind of inappropriate sexual advance. Okay. They have crossed a boundary. But if we decide that we know where the boundary lies and we decide what the consequence is, right, for us that we're going to follow through on, that's how we start to establish our boundaries and teach other people how to treat us. So you might say to the other person, if every time we sit down and have a meeting, you raise your voice, then I am not going to attend meetings with you anymore, or I'm not going to attend them without a mediator. Or you might say that same thing to somebody who makes an inappropriate sexual advance. Okay, you're being very clear about the boundary and you're being very clear about the action you're going to take. It's not an ultimatum. An ultimatum is where you show up to the meeting and you say, don't yell at me anymore. Okay, I'm not going to tolerate you yelling at me anymore. Right? That's an ultimatum. That's an attempt to manipulate the other person and control their actions. But we really can't do that with any certainty. We can make a request of another person, but they can still choose to continue to violate that boundary if they want to. Okay? We have to give the consequence of that back to them. So, I'm just checking to make sure I've covered everything on my list. Okay. So I just want to highlight that it only takes one person to make a relationship better. And the reason why we might want to be that person is for us. It's for our own well-being. It's for our own ability to enjoy our work and enjoy our job. And so the change, the work, the reason why we would put the effort into doing this work of starting to look at the way we're thinking about things and starting to ask ourselves, do I want to keep thinking and believing these things? Do I like the results this is creating for me? Is because it allows us to fulfill our own emotional needs. It allows us to be in a place where we don't need other people to change so that we can feel better emotionally. It also opens up our ability to look at other people with kindness and compassion versus blaming them, versus trying to control them. It's an opportunity for us to take full responsibility for ourselves. And I like to play around with this idea in my mind too. And I'm going to challenge you guys to do it too. The most challenging relationships teach us the most about ourselves. And if we can make room for the full humanness of the people in our lives, we can make room for other people to make mistakes without judgment, without blame, that this is how we're going to grow the most in our life in terms of our interactions with other people. Okay, that's all I have for you guys for today. Does anybody else have questions? Nicole, did that help clarify? I don't know if you're still here or not, but hopefully that helped clarify your question. I'm going to just hop over here. I know a couple of you are still left, and I'm just going to see if I can share my screen with you. Okay, let's see what happens if I do this. Um, is that showing my website now, you guys? I don't, for some reason, apparently. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. So, this is, I won't be able to see you guys for a second, but this is my my new website, which you get a little sneak preview of here. And so this is the information about my 3-month hybrid one-to-one and group coaching program. So this next one starts October 5th. And I designed this program really specifically to bring together the best resources that I have encountered in the coaching world, really for physicians who are struggling with burnout, overwhelm, perfectionism, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, you name the mind trap. That's what I designed this program for. So I just want to highlight the parts of this program for you guys. So it's 3 months and you get 6 one-to-one coaching sessions, which are 45 minutes. So you're allowed to decide the timing of those whenever you want those to take place. And then we have 2 group coaching calls every week, which happen at the same times. They're happening right now on Tuesday nights and Sunday nights. I picked times that are hopefully accessible across all time zones. Then I'm adding something new into the fall session, which is going to be a live workshop, I should say, that's going to happen every 2 weeks. And essentially the idea behind this is we're really going to it's going to become very interactive, and we're going to take the topics and we're going to take a deeper dive. I have some new topics as well that I'm going to be introducing. I have an amazing private client Facebook group, which is just awesome. It's so supportive, and I really, really, really love having everybody in there. In fact, one of my clients is like totally off social media, and she created a separate social media for herself just so she could remain in the group because she loves it so much. It's very supportive. It's really all very growth focused, and nobody's allowed in there if they violate any of that. And then I created an online course. And so I'm going to just close this screen and I'm going to hop over to, so this is the old website, but this is the portal. So you'll see that there's an audio version and then there's a video version of each of the videos. There's a bunch of external links that really just give you added resources that build on the concepts in the videos. Some of them are external, some of them are things that I've done. So for instance, I've done some videos establishing key self-coaching concepts so that you guys can learn how to coach yourselves when you graduate on out of the program. And then I've created a whole bunch of different modules. There's one for each week, and there's going to be even more in the new. Let me just see if I can get myself back here. There we go. Okay, cancel that. Okay, so, oh, maybe that didn't work. Somebody said they couldn't see it. So sorry if that didn't work and that was just a picture of me waving my hands. I apologize. I can send you guys the link to the new website if you want to take a look at it, but I think you kind of got the gist of it. So yeah, essentially what we do, and common questions I get are really what we do. So we do essentially the work that I'm doing here, but we really take and we do a deep dive into exactly what's going on for you in your life. So I would pull out a sample situation of where this has happened. We'll figure out what it is that you're thinking about in these types of situations, what feeling that creates for you, what actions you take, what results that creates. And I always like to tell people the point of doing this isn't necessarily for us to feel better in the moment, but it's for us to understand what's going on for us in our life so that we can in time start to decide if we want to keep thinking in this way. And it's very powerful as we start to pick up on what's happening for us in our life in terms of empowering us. I think for me, this is what made the biggest difference in my own mental health journey, was just starting to understand how my own human brain was working, not in a pathological capacity, but just in the limitations of any human brain, right? Of what our primitive brain creates for us based on the way we've evolved as human beings and why we think these ways, and starting to learn that this can change, which I think is so powerful. It made me really feel like I was alive again. Like it just made me feel like suddenly I had the ability to change things in my life again. So when do we do this work? So we meet 2 times a week regularly for coaching. And then the one-to-ones you're allowed to book at your own discretion. Okay. So there's lots of flexibility there. I coach during the day on Mondays and Fridays, and then I coach on the weekends and I coach in the evenings as well. So there's lots of different time slots. The group sessions really look like mini one-to-one sessions. So I bring people on, we do coaching one-to-one. It's not like we all kind of sit around and talk together. We do coaching, we focus on whatever's going on for you in your life, and then I bring somebody else up. So, and what I do is I give people the opportunity before each session to reach out beforehand if they want to particularly have coaching that day because they've got something pressing that they need to chat about. And then I'm introducing this new live workshop, which is going to be really fun. I just sort of trialed one with my current group last time, and the interaction was great. People really liked it, and so I think it's going to be very fun, very helpful going forward. To me, the group element helps us to know we're not alone, and I think we can really learn so much from seeing what other people are struggling with. And this is a very small group, so you're going to see people showing up time and time again. You're going to see them growing on their journey. That's one of the benefits of being in this program, is that we keep things really small, really high touch, really intensive. I get to know you really well, and so I can really help you work through whatever's going on for you in your life. Lots of flexibility. So I give you an online platform to book your sessions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else people commonly ask me. Between sessions, you can use the private Facebook group to reach out. You can personal message me, and I'll often send you back a few questions or something to get you thinking about what's going on in your life, help you kind of learn to build on these concepts. And the people who make use of that, I find, really tend to grow the fastest in terms of how they're doing with this work. So does anybody here have questions for me? I apologize that I can't see who's writing me questions. I will be able to see it after I close this down. It's just a funny thing about StreamYard. I should have used Zoom for this today, but I didn't. So please go ahead and post them if you have questions. I guess I can't see who's here right now. So let's see if I can go over to my Facebook and I can tell. No, how I'm going to do this. Okay. What I might need to do is get you guys who are still here just to write in the comments, just put a comment down saying live attendee right now. And then what I'll do is I'll go back. I'm sorry, you guys, I didn't anticipate this, but I'll go back and I will draw a name for a prize out of all you guys who are here right now. Thank you. I see somebody wrote still here. But yeah, please just make a comment now so that I can tell that you're here, and I'll draw a prize, and I'll message you guys in the comments afterwards and let you know who won, and then send a personal message. I'm going to draw for a free coaching session. I like to do free coaching sessions with people who come and hang out with me live. So thank you so much for all of you guys for being here. Happy Saturday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and please let me know, as always, if you have any more topics you're interested in learning about. And if somebody started a little bit late, and when you get to this at the end, go ahead and put the live attendee. I'll be able to tell, like, if it's beyond the next 20 minutes, I'll know that it wasn't somebody who started watching it live. So, so go ahead and write your comments, and you guys take care, and we'll chat soon. Okay, bye.